Good evening, and everyone, and welcome to this. I'm sure to this very would be interesting, will be interesting evening. I think by now, Professor Salvatore Babones does not need an introduction to an audience nationally as well as in Delhi. And he's very fond of the Khan Market gang, and I must assure him that we are quite close to the Khan Market gang. And I think it's an extremely it's an extreme delight to be here today, and I would like to thank all of you who have come to be part of this discussion. We have Dr. Vijay Chauthaiwale, head of the Foreign Affairs Department of the BJP, also with us. We have a number of other senior columnists, journalists as well. The panel that is accompanying Professor Babones doesn't need an introduction in this gathering. One of the senior most diplomats, former foreign secretary, former ambassador to Russia and France, Ambassador Kanwal Sibbalji, who himself is an extremely popular figure on social media, and especially while countering ratings of India's foreign policy and international affairs. I think he goes very cogently ballistic, and that is extremely popular and appreciated. We have with us Shashi Shekhar, who doesn't require an introduction. In about a decade ago, he was the first one, among the first ones, to start hugely popular portals which worked to counter the misrepresentations of India, which worked effectively to counter the misrepresentations of Narendra Modi and the entire spectrum of that side of the political divide. As CEO Prasad Bharati, Shashi Shekhar made seminal contributions in restructuring the organization, in reorienting it, and in giving it a new vision. I'm sure Smitaji will agree with me. And I think more than the number of people who have gathered here, because we got 150 plus confirmations. But I think by the time the date for this program came, they had already heard you and listened to you, and they knew what you were saying, perhaps, what you were going to say. But I think this is extremely symbolic. We have three people here who have looked at India, continue to look at India very differently. They articulate for India, they articulate the truth for an international audience, and they do it in a way which is nearly unassailable. Therefore, thank you so much. I thank this eminent panel, especially Ambassador Sibal and Shashi Shekhar, for having taken time out, and to Professor Babones, despite being exhausted and stretched, agreeing to come here. And obviously, we all recognize, notice, and applaud your saffron tie as well. Thank you so much. Professor Babones is an associate professor at the University of Sydney and the author of the recent study of India's democracy rankings, Indian democracy at 75, who are barbarians at the gate. I'm sure many of you have read the paper. He earned his MS Mathematical Sciences and PhD Sociology from Johns Hopkins University, which gives him best credentials in that sense. He's a credentialed intellectual, to use his own expression. His 2018 book, The New Authoritarianism, Trump, Populism and Tyranny of Experts, was named among the best on politics by the Wall Street Journal. And his next book that he's focusing on, about to write, is on the working of Indian democracy. And we look forward to that. Very briefly, before I give it over to Shashi Shekhar. Despite a vibrant press, a tenaciously independent judiciary, and 75 years of free and fair elections, India has somehow gained an international reputation as an authoritarian state bordering on fascism. The Economist Intelligence Unit considers India a flawed democracy. I'm reminded of how active Vijay used to be on Twitter, till the other day, encountering these, especially the Economist journalists. Sweden's Varieties of Democracy Institute calls India an electoral autocracy, and the Washington think tank Freedom House rates India as only partially free. Major news organizations uncritically report such allegations, which have now become central to the global understanding of India. This is the crux, and this is being challenged by Professor Babones. Very interestingly, and to be very brief, we discussed this last time in our first meeting. Chatham House, Bennett Coleman Institute of Public Policy, Cambridge, IDEA, Stockholm, all these institutes speak about a recession of democracy in Europe, in the West. There's no discussion on that. There should have been much more discussion on the actual democratic challenges that Europe and the West is facing. And Professor Babones has a very interesting perspective on that. And therefore, I think we come at a very interesting time. His paper also comes at a very interesting time. And I look at him in the line of scholars like David Frawley in the past, who took up the issue of India's cultural representation as well. I'll leave you at the end with a few lines from Professor Babones. I think these are going to continue to remain quite popular. India's intellectual class in its public persona is anti-India. In their hearts, I'm sure they're very proud patriots. This is in quotes. But when they go out in the public arena, they talk about India, they are certainly not highlighting India's accomplishments. More importantly, when they criticize India, as well as they should, they are, as a class, not doing so fairly and objectively. Instead, I see tons of evidences of intellectuals selectively attempting to present the worst possible picture of India in their international commentary. That is a problem for all Indians, even for India's intellectuals. Intellectuals, the Western world who does not follow Indian politics closely, believe that India is a fascist country. And that's the problem. India is not a fascist nation, but the Indian intellectuals are making the world believe that it is. Indian politics is not closely followed by the Western world. Why would not the world believe it? And at the end, about Prime Minister Modi, he says, the leader is superior enough to bring the left liberals to a new fever pitch of anger over the loss of their place in society. I mean, this is music to my ears, actually. He also, and he said that, he was accused of being a Bhaat. I'm very happy to be a Bhaat of the world's most extraordinarily successful democracy. I think that last word defines what he stands for, and thank you so much.